Orale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. This is your host, Jorge Martin and Familia. We're past it. We're past the draft, Familia. This is the nitty gritty time. This is the time that we've really been excited about. We've got the landing spots. We know people who are where they're going to be, where we could slot them. Rankings are coming in. And hey, you know what? We've got ourselves just to kick off our post-draft series, we got a heavy hitter. We got a home run hitter out there. Miguel Cabrera, Kirk Gibson, all of those, get them in there. But first off, I want to make sure you're giving us a like and subscribe over on Familia FFB on YouTube. Por favor, give us that thumbs up. Por favor. Really help us keep growing. And yes, Familia, we're a proud member of the Fantasy Points Media Group, and you'll see a little bit about our Familia happening here, the Familia feel. Yes, make sure you get great content from fantasypoints.com. I mean, this is really when you're starting to do that main studying. Get ready. It's not August. It's now. Este momento, you want to be getting in there, because I mean you're getting rankings, you got talk on landing spots, everything just from some of the great experts in the fantasy industry, including the guy right here to my side. One last plug also, make sure you're going to underdogfantasy.com, use that promo code Familia23, Familia23 if you want to do it in English. I'm going to match you up to $100, your first $100. Get in there. The best ball. I'm already in 2 slow drafts. I'm going to be getting into other ones. You've seen last week we had Joey Wright. We did a live show. I'm all over Underdog because I mean, not only am I promoting it, I'm playing it. So get in there. And Familia, I'm actually so grateful and thankful to our invitado, who's joining us right here, because I wouldn't have been surprised if he was still asleep right now after the way he hit the draft coverage last week. I mean, Familia, he's from grinding the film all those years. I mean, I know that the NFL draft is like Christmas for people like him, and I'm just so glad that we've got him on here. You've seen his great work on the Prospect Guide on fantasypoints.com. He's been podcasting 5 days a week on the Clock Show, also part of the Take Talk. And I tell you, Familia, there are very few people that I have voice envy of. This is one of them, but I'm telling you, he is one of the James Brown of content creators, one of the hardest working guys out there. He's the director of Fantasy Points Data and Research. And as a diehard Detroit Lions fans, I'm going to find out if he has either a Joey Harrington or Barry Sanders jersey somewhere in the closet. So bienvenido, Brett Whitefield. Thank you for joining me, Brett.
Jorge, thank you so much for having me. This is my pleasure, man. I'm excited to be on the show and chop it up with you, talk some ball and landing spots.
Oh, landing spots. It feels so good. I mean, I want to get kind of like that feeling, that last half hour before the NFL draft is happening. You're obviously on the live stream for Fantasy Points, but considering all the tape grinding, all of the writing that you've done and everything like that, that last bit when you know it's going to finally happen, how does that feel?
Oh, I mean, it gets to a point where you're just like, I'm so excited for tonight, but I'm also so excited for this to just be done with and move on to next year's class. Cause you definitely get draft fatigue. Like you watch, especially in this class, there were so many like similar archetypal players, like especially receivers, for example. There's so many 5'9", 170-pound guys in this class. It's like, oh my gosh, all of these guys do the same thing, and they're all come from these new air raid offenses. Just like I can't watch another one of these guys, So that like when you're going over 200 deep and writing up, detailed reports on these guys, it gets very exhausting. And when you're live on that stream as it's unfolding, it's cool to see especially when like NFL teams like agree with your thought process there. It's really cool to see that kind of unfold in real time.
I could see some of the day 2 grades that kind of came through on from the Prospect Guide to actually seeing it come through. That was great. So I got a question. When you're doing so much film grinding, how do you kind of make sure that one guy doesn't blend into the next? Because I kind of felt like I was suffering from that a little bit, and I don't get anywhere near to the level of you.
Yeah, it's so when you're trying to get to as many guys as I try to get to, it's like you have to build a process that specializes in efficiency, but sometimes efficiency isn't good for mental clarity. because like you said, if you're watching 15 receivers in a row, it is really hard to not just get in this, blending process where everyone looks the same. They're all doing the same things. They play in similar offenses. So what I try to do is I usually go 5 at a time. So I'll knock out 5 receivers, 5 running backs, 5 quarterbacks, 5 D tackles, 5 edge guys, so on and so forth. And then I kind of come back. But the way one thing my process does that I think really helps me is I do a preliminary watch on every guy. So I'll do a game or two, depending, just to kind of get a feel. And then I manually start to kind of stack my board or my rankings inside the position groups before I score them. And that really helps because I kind of go into a prospect knowing a good bit about them. I've already researched their backstory. I've already seen some film on them, like beyond what I just watched on TV. And that really does help because I kind of have a good idea of what I'm getting into before I start like diving into the tape. And I usually go a full 2 years deep on these guys. Like I'll watch no less than 2 full seasons of plays, which can take some time. So that's the biggest way. Just breaking it up with that preliminary watch, I think really helps me because I kind of know what I'm getting into with each guy. And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised, or sometimes I've viewed a guy in a higher esteem than I do when I come out after I watch the full 2 seasons.
When you do that and you see some growth, does that maybe make you from the first year to the second year? Does that kind of make you kind of put a guy up in your ranking because obviously we're looking for progression in the NFL?
Yeah, growth is something I weigh very heavily. If a guy, especially if it's like a 3-year growth track, where as a freshman to sophomore to junior, he's taken steps up. That's a huge plus for me. It gets really tough when you get into guys like JSN who didn't play his last year, or a guy like Quentin Johnson who had all this hype coming into the year, and while he played good in 2022, it wasn't to the level people were expecting. People really thought he had an opportunity to seize the day and it'd become that bona fide top 10 pick. And obviously the draft capital investment wasn't too far off of that, but I still think people were left disappointed with what he put on tape in 2022. So you have to weigh that stuff pretty carefully and not get too emotional about it or too knee-jerk reaction. But anytime you see a player that grows season to season, that's like that makes it an easy projection because you can see the progress there. You don't have to make any guesses.
No, awesome. Now, when does your tape grinding start for the 2024 draft? Do you give yourself a little bit of a break?
No, I don't, because I run the data team over here at Fantasy Points.
Right.
We have a huge consumer product coming out in the next month or so that's going to be industry changing, by the way. But so that's my baby at Fantasy Points. That was the primary reason I was hired, and I manage a team of 20 guys, and we're grinding all the NFL tape. And that season ends, obviously, Super Bowl's first Sunday in February, and that's it. That's when the college football season grind starts for me. So I try to keep tabs on guys throughout the year. Obviously, I watch a lot of live games on Saturdays. Sometimes I'll catch up on a game I wanted to watch on Sunday. But for the most part, I don't start grinding the players till February. Now, I will. The small caveat is that I didn't know I was going to be writing the prospect guide this year. Like that was
surprise.
Yeah, that was dumped on my lap. So I do this process anyways every year, but it's at my own pace, my own leisure. I don't have to have perfectly worded formal write-ups for 200 plus guys, so it's a little bit less stressful this year. I found out the week of the Senior Bowl, we were down there in Mobile, so that was the week before the Super Bowl that I was going to be doing the prospect guide, and which is a great honor. I was, I volunteered. I was like, well, if we have the need, I'll do it. Sure. I love this stuff. So no problem there. But it also, time strapped me going into next year, knowing that this is now a role I'll be, keeping on with. I'm going to start the 2024 grind right now. So we'll have a lot more time on our hands come this time next year.
Well, I mean, also being a subscriber to The Athletic and getting the Beast, I'm like, I saw all of the same granularity and yeah, I enjoyed. I've enjoed both of them, so just love the work. Love the work, Familia, and it's free on fantasypoints.com. So all of that great tape grinding, it's all just right there in bite-sized chunks. A great read. You can pick it up at any point. So make sure to bookmark it and read it. So yeah, Brett. So one of the things that I love just from hearing you on the On the Clock and also the Take Talk podcast, you're an unabashed Detroit Lions fan, which I know has been, hopefully has been better. Last year, there was some light at the end of the tunnel. I just need to know, who was your guy growing up? Was it Barry Sanders, or was that too easy?
That is probably too easy. I mean, everyone was a Barry Sanders guy. He had no haters. I mean, probably the only athlete in history with literally zero haters, except for maybe Emmitt Smith. But that is.
Oh no, he's a Cowboy. No, there's of course he's got his haters.
Yeah. So Barry, I loved Barry, but that era was a little bit young for me. Like, Barry retired, I think, when I was 10 or 11. In that era, I was more of a Chris Spielman guy. I loved Chris Spielman. Obviously, he's back with the team now in the front office, calling some of the shots. So loved Chris Spielman. In my era, though, growing up, gosh, Calvin Johnson. Like, I think I was 18 or 19 when Calvin Johnson was drafted, and so I mean he was my dude. I love Calvin. I have a Darius Slay jersey. I have an Ndamukong Suh jersey. So those were my guys.
Oh, Calvin Johnson, one of my absolute favorites. Obviously, a favorite of any fantasy manager who had him on his or her team. So, God, a beautiful player. And you know what? It's funny. You were talking about Quentin Johnston earlier. Yeah. I feel like we keep trying to find the next Calvin Johnson, and it's just kind of like, there's only one Sandy Koufax. There's only one, there's only one Willie Mays. There's only one Eric Dickerson. And gosh, I mean, Calvin Johnson, I mean, they get 6'5", 230, running under 4.5. Yeah, come on, just enjoy what happened.
For sure. Good luck finding the next Calvin Johnson. I don't know that one will exist.
No, not at all. Not at all. But talking about Barry, but you're right. No, it doesn't have haters. But yeah, Emmitt, you go to Philly, Dallas, Philly, and Washington, you might have a couple there. But this draft class, just because of the guy at the top, there was a lot of hype about it. Overall, considering some of the landing spots kind of hurt. For fantasy, people were kind of hoping for more potential bell cow roles, but from a talent standpoint and just kind of like a first 35,000 view of the landing spots, what's been your overall impression of this class?
Yeah, so I was a fan of this class coming into the draft. I thought it had a good amount of depth to it. I thought it was, it wasn't superstar heavy necessarily, although I do think JAHMYR GIBBS is probably criminally underrated, despite my reaction to the Lions drafting him. I'll give you a fun little nugget too, Jorge. How about this? So
go for it.
I've been scoring prospects since 2015. That was my first class. That was the Todd Gurley year. So Chris and I, we compiled all my draft scores. We took a look at my top 20 running back scores. And JAHMYR GIBBS, I didn't even realize this during the draft process. He scores as my 5th highest graded running back ever. Sandwiched between Saquon Barkley and Todd Gurley. So he's the highest scored running back since Saquon Barkley, which was 5 years ago. And I had him above Todd Gurley. Now, granted, Todd Gurley had some injury, the chronic stuff coming out, that I think his raw score was probably higher. But when I factored the injury in there, that dropped him down to 6. But that's pretty remarkable. He's basically notoriously lived in Bijan's shadow for this draft cycle, because everyone only talked about Bijan as being this special generational guy. Well, my numbers kind of say that GIBBS might be too. 5th highest scored running back out of, I don't know, we've probably got like over 100 since 2015. So that's a pretty remarkable feat for GIBBS there. So, but outside of those two guys, Bijan Robinson, JAHMYR GIBBS, it did lack a little oomph as far as like superstar potential, but I felt like there was 15 guys after them that all had at least one really developed skill or trait that they could offer a team and be a very functional, productive running back for a team. And obviously some of those guys are landing spot dependent. But yeah, I mean, overall, I like the class.
And you know what? It's great about, we talked a little bit about progression already and guys improving. Todd Gurley was not a great pass catcher coming out. And I mean, 2017 and 2018, I mean, the pass catching took him to RB1 status both years, and he would have been RB1 back-to-back if he hadn't sat out the last 2 games of the 2018 season. But wow, so where does Bijan? So you got JAHMYR GIBBS at number 5. Bijan was where?
Bijan's my number 2 overall between McCaffrey and Zeke.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. Yeah, that God, some special players in there, and yeah, and look at what they've all done. I mean, they've all had RB1 seasons, and just hopefully the same things happening with Bijan. So let's get in there. Let's start with Bijan right there.
Yeah.
Going to the Falcons, going to the team that led the league in rushing attempts. I think they were number 3 in overall rushing yards. Going to the Falcons, that landing spot. How much do you love it?
I mean, I absolutely love it. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better situation for a guy that's been penned as the bell cow of the class. He's going to obviously get bell cow workload right away. Arthur Smith is notoriously known for chasing unicorns. He got one in Kyle Pitts. He got another one last year in Drake London. And now he got one in Bijan Robinson. It's actually wild when you look at those first 2 guys I mentioned that they would consider a running back. Because like at some point you got to start investing elsewhere, but Arthur Smith doesn't care. He's just like, whatever. I need my unicorns. He's used to calling plays with AJ Brown and Derrick Henry in the lineup, so he's got to go find those guys for him. And I think when you see what Arthur Smith accomplished with Henry in Tennessee, I mean, Bijan's a way better prospect than Derrick Henry was. So this is phenomenal landing spot. I mean, the only concern is their pass game is so suspect at the moment, especially with Desmond Ridder likely to be throwing the football there this year. You worry about the pass catching upside with Bijan. Obviously, Henry struggled with that when he was in Tennessee. They've never really dialed it up a lot to their running backs. I know Cordell Patterson got a little bit of run as a pass catching option for them, but he's also a former receiver. I think Bijan is a sneaky underrated guy in the pass game. I mean, if you want to talk about tape and you know what guys do on tape, no running back in this class put more impressive reps on tape as a pass catcher. And I include JAHMYR GIBBS in that. Texas would use Bijan in the slot. They'd use him out wide in running actual wide receiver routes against safeties, against slot corners or linebackers. And Bijan was winning those reps and catching the ball downfield. JAHMYR GIBBS, when he was used in similar roles, it was always for a screen pass or a drag route or some type of scramble drill or whatever. He never actually went out there and ran receiver routes. So I think Bijan's like an underrated guy in the pass game. So my only concern with the landing spot is the pass game utilization there. He's going to get 300 plus carries though right out the gate, so you're not going to be too worried about it. But
yeah, I'd love to see the 300 plus carries. Maybe I'd love to see maybe 50 receptions, maybe 60 65 targets, and I think he's going to catch everything. I still marvel. To me, one of the greatest plays I saw last season was the catch that he made against Alabama, where he basically did does a 180, makes the catch, and then completes the 180. And that's unicorn type stuff. That's yes. and to me, I grew up watching when the Rams got Eric Dickerson, and the Rams throughout his career they battled getting quarterback. Granted, different era, but sometimes to me the thing about it is the running back can be so great that he could supersede great mediocre quarterback play, and I'm hopeful that's the case. So fingers crossed, por favor.
I think that's Arthur's thinking there too. Is like, hey, we didn't really have a clear pathway to upgrading quarterback this year. We also want to see what we have in Ridder. Let's just support him the best way we can. We got a couple of good pass catchers. Let's add the run game element to it. Between Bijan and Algier, there's no reason those guys can't, combine for over 2,000 yards. So,
yeah, I think Algier is probably going to be 100, 125 rushing attempts on the season, and that's probably it. So goodbye to my dynasty value on him. So, right. But that's okay. We get to watch Bijan and get to see what the NFL does with him as far as marketing purposes. A lot of mustard on that guy. Next guy, JAHMYR GIBBS. Your reaction in the moment, please. What was going on? I wanted to say apoplectic was the adjective that I saw, because I had to watch it a couple times because I laughed so hard. Yeah, your immediate reaction.
I kind of shut down on the stream when the GIBBS pick was made, and then when they picked Campbell a few picks later, I went from shut down to angry. The GIBBS pick, though, one of the things that perplexed me was, in all of the mock drafting scenarios I did, I never one time considered that the Lions could take JAHMYR GIBBS at their first pick. The funny thing is I had a bet on DraftKings that for the Lions' first position to be drafted was running back, but that was me hedging against them taking Bijan, because with my analytical background, I'm not a running backs in the first round guy, even more the special talent. So I was like, oh, I know the Lions, they're gonna break my heart and they're gonna draft Bijan at 6. So I went and made that bet. It was like 20-1 odds that their first position drafted would be running back, and it was. So I cashed the bet, but like, I never considered that it could be GIBBS. Now, I also never really considered a trade back to 12. So yeah, my reaction was just complete. Like, my mind was broken. Like, I'm puzzled. What just happened? You know, and when I go back and I look at those historical grades that I've given running backs, yeah, 12th overall actually tracks with where I've graded GIBBS compared to those other running backs. You know, Gurley was a top 10 pick. Ezekiel Elliott, Bijan, McCaffrey, those are all top 10 picks, and those are the guys he's surrounded by on my board. So I guess, yeah, that tracks. So in a way, I was just blown away because I just did not see that coming. It was completely off my radar as an option, and maybe it shouldn't have been, you know. but as far as the landing spot goes, though, I mean, I feel like you got to be excited about it. And I know initial reaction from people on Dynasty Twitter was, oh, this is terrible. They have David Montgomery. GIBBS is never going to be a bell cow. GIBBS was never going to be a bell cow. He's 200 pounds. You're looking for a guy in a very specialized role. Maybe the only spot in the league he would have become a bell cow was Los Angeles Chargers if they moved on from Eckler, because they're roughly the same size. That's probably the only team in the league willing to put that amount of work on his plate. I love the landing spot here. Montgomery's going to do all the dirty work, and GIBBS is going to look like the stud that he is. You know, he's going to come in. Think about the DeAndre Swift role early in the year last year before the injuries. That's what, like, GIBBS is going to be their dude. There might be weeks where Montgomery out touches him, but GIBBS is going to be doing all of the pass game stuff. He's going to be doing all of the, you know, the stretch counter, power runs, stretch zone stuff, everything hitting to the outside edges, and they're going to really maximize that playmaking ability, that mismatch potential in the pass game. I think it's awesome. And because they have Montgomery, you're going to keep him alive. That was their biggest knock on Swift, was just the unwillingness to play through injuries. It wasn't even that he got hurt. Guys get hurt. It's just he was never like, if he had a small injury, he wouldn't play through it, or he played really poorly when he was injured. That was, I mean, you saw it on Hard Knocks. Deuce Staley was notorious for riding Swift about that. Well, GIBBS, from everything they've been told, is that he's just the toughest dude on the field. He's only 200 pounds, but he plays like he's a lot bigger. He's super tough, willing to play no matter what. So it's definitely a football character move there. And I think if he gets that early season Swift role from last year, I mean, he's going to be an awesome dynasty asset.
And you know, you mentioned a little bit about, you talked about Todd Gurley. Who was Gurley's quarterback when he blew up as a pass catcher? It was Goff. Goff knows how to unlock that running back in the passing game. I think I'm pumped. Great offensive line too. So I mean, it's just all the factors are there. He's not going to see a stack box, because, you know, when he is in a running situation, because the sun got on the side and Jameson Williams after 6 games. So I think I'm pumped for this one. I've got the 5th pick in a draft coming up in a couple days, and it's all lining up for JAHMYR GIBBS to be that guy. I'm going to grab him unless somebody blows me away with a trade offer. So because I do need a wide receiver, but when you get the best guy on the board, go and grab him. So the next guy, DEVON ACHANE, as I'd say in Spanish. You might hear that a little bit in Miami. Going to the Dolphins. All they've got right now is Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. They needed a pass catching back. Mike McDaniels loves him some speed guys. As far as a landing spot, could this be one of the better landing spots for him?
Yeah. So ACHANE is really tough for me. When I watched him, I didn't love him as a running back. I've been notorious saying on the clock, if they brought his card up and announced him as a wide receiver, I'd immediately bump his score by a full round grade, because that's how much I believe in him as a receiver. The problem is he wasn't very productive catching the ball in college. Really low yards per catch, really low yards after contact per catch. Didn't make a lot of guys miss. And then he also didn't necessarily run a ton of receiver type routes. It was mostly work out of the backfield. That said, if you're trying to project ACHANE to the NFL and what would be the best system for him, it is the Kyle Shanahan outside zone heavy scheme. Because of that speed, because of that cutback ability, they're basically recreating Raheem Mostert is what they're doing with him. And ACHANE's very small. He's not quite Mostert size, and Mostert's small. So yeah, you couldn't ask for a better landing spot for him. If he was going to succeed and make it go in the NFL, it is in any of those teams, whether it was the Jets, the 49ers, Miami. Now, the only problem from a long-term standpoint is none of those guys are ever willing to commit to one running back. so he's going to be in a timeshare probably his whole career. But that, for a guy his size, that's probably necessary. You know, he's GIBBS is only 200. We talked about him being small. I think ACHANE's actual playing weight is 175. I know he weighed in at the combine a little heavier than that, but from everything I've heard is he put on a little weight to to weigh in at the combine to impress the scouts there, and he still blazed a 4.3 240. So, but yeah, fast guy, but he's tailored. His skill set's tailor made for that offensive scheme though. So I do love the landing spot for him. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's not a guy who's going to get. I mean, I think it was 38 carries that he got to get at LSU. I don't think he's going to get that. I'm looking at him maybe 10 to 15 touches total in a game where they're just going to, maybe probably split between receptions and targets. Targets and rushing attempts. So that's the way I kind of look at him. I love speed. But yeah, he is so small. I can imagine if you're looking at Roschon Johnson and then his tape, and then you see DEVON ACHANE, it's just like these are different. They don't play the same position. They can't be.
Yeah, think about the nightmare they've created with him now. They have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Eric Nzukama from last year. A lot of people don't know about him, but he's a dude who's a demon after the catch. Bringing in ACHANE. All these guys it's similar to what the Lions are doing. They're getting guys that are incredible in space. We talked about GIBBS at the Lions with like Sam Laporta, Sun God, Jameson. These guys are all nightmares to tackle in the open field. Miami's doing the same exact thing. They have so much speed on the field. I don't even know how you begin to start to cover it. Like, that's why ACHANE's upside in the pass game should be humongous there, because he's not ever going to see tight defensive formations. Those linebackers, because you're playing Waddle and Tyreek, those linebackers are going to get deeper on their drops than a traditional team you'd be playing. He's going to have a ton of space to work with underneath. And if Tua can find him on those short routes, man, he should eat. He should absolutely eat. So,
this is going to be fun. Now, going from fun to a headache. Zach Charbonnet from my backyard here at UCLA. We're a Bruin family. My wife's a Bruin. My daughter was born there at the medical center. But I think in the fantasy community, we all had so much hope that he would land somewhere like Cincinnati, where he could maybe have close to a bell cow role, or at least early down. But now going to it's great for football. It is great for football. Those people who liked, the old Carolina Panthers when they had, Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams, that kind of, but are they going to cannibalize Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker? Is it going to be kind of like cannibalizing one another?
Unfortunately, this is just what the Seahawks do.
Yeah.
It's been a couple years, but they do this. They rewind to 2016. They have Marshawn Lynch in the prime of his career, and they go ahead and they draft a running back in the second round to be a pass game specialist. Now he doesn't hit; he's a bust. But then they stumble upon this guy named Chris Carson in the 7th round, who ends up being a stud. He plays really well. 2017 rolls around. Chris Carson kind of breaks out. They re-sign him, give him a good amount of money. Marshawn Lynch is still on the roster, and then what do? They draft Rashad Penny in the 1st round, a year after they drafted CJ Prosise in the 1st round, or 2nd round. No, he was a 3rd round pick. Sorry. But point being, it's like they are always willing to invest into that spot. It's their identity. It's what they do. Kenneth Walker, 2nd round pick last year. They don't care. They go ahead and they do it again. Almost the same slot too. I think Walker was the 48th pick. Charbonnet is 52nd. It's like this is just what they do. Then they double down and they grab Kenny McIntosh in the 6th or 7th round. Who is he going to take away carries from those guys? No, but he's a pass game specialist, phenomenal route runner, really, really good hands. It's like he's kind of probably going to replace Travis Homer. I think the best projection for these guys right now is early season last year when you saw Walker kind of trying to work his way in. And then Rashad Penny was that lead back. I think Walker's now in the Penny role. Charbonnet comes in as that like change of pace / pass game subject because he's really good in pass pro. I think that's probably why they liked him. And then Kenny McIntosh gets sprinkled in with certain packages. It is a headache. I mean, you described it perfectly right there. It's a headache. So the problem too is like both guys are really talented. Like Walker, he's a home run hitting machine. Obviously, like the efficiency metrics are good on paper, but when you really dive into that, you see a low success rate. You see, you know, a ton of stuffed runs with him. Like his vision just was not up to par last year. Part of that was their interior offensive line was not great either. They weren't doing him any favors. He had early penetration a lot, and he, you know, gets happy feet, panics a little bit. Charbonnet is a very patient runner, has really, really good vision. I think I said in my scouting profile, it's eagle eye vision. So I think maybe they're looking for a guy to be more consistent there as well, and then rely on Walker to be that home run hitter. But yeah, I don't even know how they have so many weapons. It's like it's a gross abundance of wealth with skill players there. I mean, between the 3 receivers they now have, between, you know, I would say decent tight ends and Disley and Fant. Those guys aren't bad players. Disley has a certain role, Fant has a certain role, and now you've got 2-3 running backs in the fold. I don't even know how you project these guys. I mean, it's there's so many mouths to feed.
Oh, so many mouths to feed. I think selfishly, me from an NFL standpoint, I wanted to see them, you know, get a D lineman, maybe, you know, an interior defensive lineman because they needed help against the running. They were one of the worst running defenses of the last year. But hey, you know what? Fine. We want points. We'll have to figure it out. This could be one of those things that just kind of figures itself out over the season, or it doesn't. It's just kind of a headache for the whole season.
Yeah.
The next one. One of your favorite ones.
Yes.
You were at the Senior Bowl, so you got to see the practices before he got hurt, and he was one of the guys that was talked about, ROSCHON Johnson. But he's going into running back group with Khalil Herbert and I'm blank. Khalil Herbert and Deonta Foreman.
Yep.
And now you got Johnson, who big back. He helps in pass pro, which the others maybe don't. What's his outlook?
Yeah, so my comp for ROSCHON Johnson was David Montgomery, ironically. They lose David Montgomery in free agency to the Lions, despite them offering him basically the same contract the Lions did. And David said, no, I'll go ahead and move on. I probably like this landing spot more than everybody. I've never really been a Khalil Herbert believer. I don't think he's a bad player by any means, but there's some consistencies in his NFL tape to his college tape as far as deficiencies go. He's not doing the small things that a guy like David Montgomery did. He's not doing the dirty work. Really, really, really poor in pass pro. Almost unwilling to be a blocker in pass pro. When you have a quarterback like Fields that you want to start getting to feel comfortable back there, that's really important. I mean, it's an underrated quality by most dynasty managers. Like pass protection is huge. So I really like ROSCHON to the Bears. It's a direct 1-to-1 replacement to me for Montgomery. I think people get hung up on the efficiency metrics for Herbert without they always compare Herbert's stats to Montgomery's. And what they don't look in is the depth of why that is. Montgomery was used in short yardage situations, like at the rate of 3-to-1. His yards per carry is going to be way down because of that. His yards after contact are going to be way down because of that. Basically, they lined him up on every 3rd and 4th and short and every goal line carry that they had the entire season. Herbert was never used that way. They also used heavy personnel when Montgomery was on the field versus Herbert. Herbert was often used with 11 and 10 personnel in spread formations with read option attached to every single carry. He's getting a soft box. Justin Fields has taken away one of those defenders as well. You put those two things in conjunction with each other, and what you come to find out is Montgomery on average had 2 more guys in the box per carry than Herbert did. Now compare that for efficiency. So it's easy to be efficient. It's like the Kendre Miller effect in TCU. It's like easy to be efficient when you're running against 5-6 man boxes every single carry. Montgomery never was afforded that opportunity. So, and I get teams have different roles for different players. I would be inclined to think Herbert stays in that role that he was in. And in games when Montgomery was healthy, Herbert kind of took a back seat. They never really went full 50-50 timeshare there. Montgomery was always the alpha dog, and they diverted to him getting the lion's share of the carries. When Montgomery was hurt and out of the lineup, that's when you saw Herbert have those breakout games where he's getting 15-plus carries. So I wouldn't be shocked, Jorge, if ROSCHON steps in right away and gets a good workload there. I think the wild card is Dante Foreman, but considering he's bounced around from team to team now, I just don't think the NFL views him as a guy. I think he's a rotational player at best, I think.
Yeah, kind of like I think Foreman just got so much run at the end of the season last year because he was last man standing. You know, and we know the NFL is the next man up kind of league. Johnson, to me, he kind of strikes me as a guy who could really pop in the second half of the season, just from the fact that he might outlast these guys. He's a bigger guy, and you mentioned the pass pro. It cannot be emphasized enough. It's like in baseball, a hitter who gets kept on the field because he's great with the glove.
Yeah.
And you know, ROSCHON getting so much. I think he's going to get some play, and he might outlast these guys because Khalil Herbert has missed time in the last 2 seasons, and Foreman is also, you know, I know he's been relatively healthy, but you know, he does have an Achilles in his background. So Johnson, and he was kind of like my Dameon Pierce this year, that guy who didn't get a lot of run in college. So that to me, maybe not. Maybe he's one of those guys who pops in 2024. I got next guy is I'm really interested because this is the first day 3 guy that I brought up. Chase Brown going to the Bengals. Now, as of right now, Joe Mixon is still on the team. There's, you know, I know he got a vote of confidence from Zach Taylor recently, but to have him, and you said some good things about him in the prospect guide. What this landing spot for Chase Brown?
Yeah, so we talked about Miami being Devin ACHANE's best possible outcome as far as landing spot goes. Well, Cincinnati would have been number 2 probably, and so Chase Brown has a very similar skill set to ACHANE, except he's a little bit bigger. He lands in that spot with the Cincinnati Bengals. They run the same. The run scheme is basically the same as the Miami Dolphins, so he's going to be able to use that speed and cutback ability with that outside zone scheme there in Cincinnati. I really love the landing spot. We saw them kind of go away from the outside zone stuff last year. And there's been some rumblings, you know, between comments coaches have made, running back coach, O-line coach, that they need to get back to their identity in the run game. And that means outside zone. So enter Chase Brown. He was made to play in that outside zone. He has straight line speed and one cut ability. Not going to make a ton of guys miss, but if you're finding the creases, that's all that matters. And I really love the landing spot. It's hard to bank on a round 5 player being significant in fantasy football. It's just unlikely. But if there was a guy I was going to bank on, it would probably be him.
No, I love the landing spot as well. And I mean, we still have to figure out what happens. Joe Mixon is still on the team as of right now, but there is, if even if he gets the Samaje Perine role, there's something to be there. Another guy going into a muddled backfield, KENDRE Miller.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Yeah, KENDRE was a interesting study because, you know, I mentioned the soft box stuff with Khalil Herbert, and I even name dropped KENDRE in that rant. KENDRE, like at TCU, he never had to run against stacked boxes. So like what you see from him though is him just knifing through a wide open hole, and then he basically has to make a guy miss in order to pick up significant yards. And he did that a lot. He did his job, did it really, really well. He was tough to evaluate though, because he's averaging over 7 yards a carry, and it seemed that 7 yards per carry seemed very propped up by the scheme there with that crazy spread. They run a system not all too dissimilar to Tennessee. We've seen all the critics of the Tennessee offense this draft cycle with Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt. TCU is right there. It's not quite the same veer and shoot style air raid, but it is an air raid. They do like to spread you out thin and take advantage of those favorable box counts. So KENDRE was a really tough eval because of that. But when you look at the physical traits that he has, that ability to get low, sink those hips, make guys miss, the vision that he has, like, I think he's a really, really good player. This is about the range I expected him to go into. Mm-hmm. So I think I nailed the draft capital expectation there. I don't think the Saints backfield is too scary either. Kamara is in a similar legal issue to Mixon. There's a chance. I mean, shoot, I've even heard rumblings they might just move on from Kamara, just cut him.
Oh wow.
That's not. I'm not breaking news or sourcing anything. I've just
it's true.
Hearing rumblings, that could be in the works. And then Jamal Williams is just a guy. He's a great locker. He brings more to the locker room than he does the football field, and I don't think Jamal would get in the way of KENDRE taking over a backfield if KENDRE produces the way I think he can, or if he lives up to his draft capital. I do think there's a realistic scenario KENDRE is the clear RB1 by the end of the year.
Plus, also good offensive line. Another decent offensive line that's going to be opening some holes for him. So
Yep.
When all else fails, get the teams with the good lines. So I got three more guys in our top 10. I'm going to kind of go rapid fire a little bit because things are a little bit questionable as to whether they're going to be how big a role they're going to have.
Sure.
TYJAE Spears blew up in the bowl game against USC, but going into the Titans, having to play behind Derrick Henry. What's his role? What could his role be?
It's interesting because he's missing his ACL on his left knee. This came out right before the draft. I've talked to a lot of doctors like in the sport that currently work in football. A lot of them have told me he had to have been off at least half the team's draft boards altogether. So for the fact that the Titans dropped a round 3 pick on him is wild to me. Maybe their medicals came out differently. Maybe they think it's okay. Sounds like there's some arthritis issues in that knee as well. So you're looking at basically the Todd Gurley, Sony Michel tract. At best, the fact that he's missing his ACL altogether, though, suggests, this could be 2-3 years and done. Love the player, though. Extremely talented kid. I'd call him a JAHMYR GIBBS light. He moves similarly to GIBBS. Doesn't have quite the same explosiveness in the open field and straight line speed as GIBBS, but as far as the way he moves, the things he does well, I mean, he's a very similar player. If they're looking for maybe a compliment to Derrick Henry to maybe elongate Henry's career as well, I think that's a great option. Maybe in conjunction, they keep each other around longer. I don't know. But as far as him ever becoming a bell cow, you got to be really worried about that considering the medicals.
Yeah, and the knee thing, I also think I heard something similar about Thurman Thomas, but I think, we're talking about outliers who did that. So, I guess enjoy him while we can. Tank Bigsby going to the Jaguars in 3rd round, number 88 overall, but he's got Travis Etienne coming off of a really good opening campaign. What's in backup role mostly for him?
So Tank was one of my guys in the process. I don't know if you read the My Guys piece I put on fantasypoints.com, but if you were looking for a guy who profiles as a potential bell cow after Bijan, Tank Bigsby was the next guy up. Really good in the pass game, really tough runner. He checks the 3 premium traits boxes, which is vision, ability to make you miss, and burst, acceleration. Those are my 3 premium traits when scouting running backs, and he checks all 3 of those boxes with flying colors. So I love the fit. I'm a little disappointed at the landing spot because Etienne is such a good player. But the more I dove into this, the more I realized I think Etienne is highly overrated as a pass game guy. You saw that kind of bear itself out towards the end of last year. He really wasn't involved in the pass game at all. I think he had like 35 targets on the year. Despite Urban Meyer shooting his mouth off saying he's the next Percy Harvin, blah, 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 blah. I just don't think Etienne is that level of player. So maybe the Jags were just looking for more in that regard. And Tank is a well-rounded back, but he also probably gives them a little more in the pass game than Travis Etienne does.
Yeah, so maybe he gets 10 or so touches a game that could pop. The last one that I'm an unabashed Ram fan, so by the way, thank you for Matthew Stafford. Zach Evans going to the Rams. All of a sudden, he's got Cam Akers had that great close to the season, but he's got the injury issues going into last year. Kyron Williams, could there be a role for him even coming out of the 6th round?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think Cam is, since the ACL, he's had moments for sure, but I don't think he's established himself as a running back that doesn't deserve competition in the backfield. So Evans, the thing he brings to the table is pedigree, right? Like 5-star recruits. Obviously, he bounced around a little bit, starting his career at TCU, then going to Ole Miss. But ultimately, I think he brings pedigree. He does have a pretty defined skill set. The consistency on tape was the big issue with him, right? So he'd pop for 3-4 games in a row, then have a couple bad games, and then seemed to really he never elevated his level of play based on the competition, which you always want to see when you're scouting these guys. So there's some concerns there, but as far as a complete package, he can do some work in the pass game. He's got exceptional acceleration. His burst is ridiculous. He kind of gives them a little bit of a change of pace. I felt like on paper, the idea of Henderson and Akers always made sense. Henderson more of that quick slasher type runner. Well, Evans is going to bring you the same skill set there. So do I think he starts off in a determined role? No, I think he's got to go earn it. But if he earns it, I think there's a chance, he's maybe not in a full timeshare, but he's a rotational piece there. And he's one injury away from being a legitimate fantasy guy.
No, yeah, so you got to either get at the end of drafts or be ready to spend some fab on him. Yep. Last one, day 3 brought us 3 running backs last year who were at various points of fantasy viable: Dameon Pierce, Isaiah Pacheco, and Tyler Algier. Is there a guy that you saw go on day 3 other than the guys we mentioned who could do some damage?
Yeah, it's other than the ones we mentioned, I would probably, if I had to throw my hat in the ring for one guy, I would say Izzy Ebenaconda. This is a guy I had a late day 2 grade on. Obviously, he goes later. I haven't heard a good reason for why. Seemed like all the metrics and stuff clearly pointed at him being a day 2 pick. In fact, there's only one running back in NFL since the year 2000 with his measurables and his production that didn't go day 1 or day 2, and that was Roy Halou. So it's a little bit abnormal that he went as late as he did. However, Brees coming off the ACL, I think people are being overly optimistic about what he's going to bring to the table in 2023. You also heard the rumors that they were in on GIBBS at 15, and the Lions sniped him. Brugler reported that. I think Lance Zierlein backed it up, and then even some of the New York Jets beat writers themselves have also confirmed that the Jets were set to take JAHMYR GIBBS there at pick 15, a year after they drafted Brees Hall in the second round. That's not necessarily a knock on Brees, but I think it does speak to the idea that maybe he's not going to be 100% for this year, and they wanted to give him a complimentary piece there beyond, a couple, undrafted type guys, and Zonovan Knight and Michael Carter, who they just seem to not like for whatever reason. So that said, Izzy is another one of these guys who translates best to that outside zone scheme. Just like Miami, just like Cincinnati, the coaching staff there, they're going to be running more of that Shanahan style offensive playbook where it's going to be a lot of stretch zone type stuff. So I think Izzy's acceleration and top end speed is favorable to that. And again, not a guy who's going to force a lot of misses, but he is going to open up cutback lanes and he is going to be able to hit home runs. So I do think maybe he carves out a role there and can contribute right away.
And this is another part of a part of that Shanahan tree where it just uses multiple running backs.
Yep.
So, I think he's expected to get some run in there. There's so many different type of body types. Are there any kind of running back prototypes that you really look at? I grew up in the Earl. My 2 all-time favorite players are Earl Campbell and Eric Dickerson at the position. Obviously, Barry is another right there with them for me. Any prototypes you look at?
So for me, like with my analytics background, like running backs don't really move the needle as far as run game efficiency. That hangs on the shoulders of the offensive line and play calling. If you want a good run game, O-line and play calling are way more, they determine the success of that way more than your running back does. So when I'm scouting running backs, I really lean towards the guys that can affect the pass game in a really good way, and they're math changers in that regard. So I do tend to favor guys that can contribute heavily in the pass game as far as my personal preference. So yeah, like Marshall Faulk, JAHMYR GIBBS, like Christian McCaffrey, these guys, I love these guys because they do change the math for you when you are passing the ball. You're turning, a simple check down into first downs a lot of the time with these guys. So
oh, love it. Oh, Brett, I feel like I got smarter today. Thank you. Old dog learning new tricks. I love it. But I'm not going to let you get away without a fun question. This being Familia FFB, one of the favorite things that we love to talk about is Mexican food. Your neck of the woods. What are some of your favorites?
Yeah, so Michigan, well, Metro Detroit specifically, is a really underrated, I guess, melting pot of cultures where you can find authentic food from just about every part of the world where I live. We live in a tremendously diverse area. It's fantastic. So with that said, there's a lot of really good Mexican restaurants. Right in downtown Detroit, there's a spot called Mexican Village. It's like an actual, it's like 2 or 3 whole blocks of just authentic Mexican food. And you can't find bad tacos there. There's multiple restaurants that do it. Mexican Town, Mexican Village. There's I forget the name of the other one. It's great. all the food's great. I've never ate down there and been like, this was bad. It's all tremendously good. And then there's a spot here in Plymouth. It's a little more on the bougie side, but it's called Barrio. It's the super vibey spot, but they have something called Dorados tacos.
That's authentic.
Oh my gosh, these things slap. Probably if my wife asked me, hey, you can have one meal tonight in the area, where are we going to eat? I would pick Barrio and I would get Dorados tacos. It's the best.
Actually, Edwin Porras and I have had multiple conversations about tacos dorados tacos. It's just, that's the way my mom makes them, and it's just one of the great things. So yes, I love it. Hot, sauce heat level. What's your favorite?
I'll take it as hot as they'll give it to me. And they always remind me. They're like, you are a white guy. Are you sure? Yeah. Yeah, I've been practicing long enough. I can handle it, and if I can't, I'll admit that I was wrong. But they always give me the warning, though. You guys aren't really accustomed to eating things this spicy. Are you sure? So.
Yeah. Well, see, when I ask for hot, I ask in Spanish, but then I'll show them. If it is hot, I'll start glistening up here, but I'm like, yeah, that just means it was really good. That just means it was fantastic. Oh, and Brett, this was fantastic. Mi amigo, you got a lot of stuff coming out. You've already put out so much great stuff. What do we got coming up?
Yeah, so be on the lookout for that data package I was talking about. That is going to be an industry changer. If you don't already have a Fantasy Point subscription, you're going to want one, because that data package is going to be insane. I'll be continuing to cover the draft. My podcast On the Clock will be daily for another week or two, and then we'll be going to weekly, and we'll start to look ahead at the 2024 class, and then we'll ramp that back up to daily again come January. So we're not going away. All the draft coverage will still be there. It's kind of a new thing we're doing at Fantasy Points, covering the draft year round versus just a few months. So,
and you know what? It is like we know the NFL is year round. That's what's beautiful. That's why it's great there. Love that. And by the way, thank you for not doing too much of a victory lap over kicking my butt in the Fantasy Points Staff League last year.
I forgot. Yes. Chris Wecht and I and Steve O'Rourke, we ran the data team, and we took you down in the championship there, and I was very proud moment for us. But hey, you put up a heck of a fight. So
I did. Thank you to Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce for carrying me, and Tyler Algier, RIP to your 1,000-yard season. So I'll take the benefit of that one. But man, this was such a pleasure. Un gran placer. Familia, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Make sure, again, go to fantasypoints.com, get that great content, get that subscription, that 2023 subscription. Also, make sure you're going to Underdog Fantasy. Put in that promo code Familia23, Familia23, if you want to do it in Spanish. Get you that first $100 off. You find me at Jorge Martin 17. You find him at BG Whitefield on Twitter, and FamiliaFFB.com for original content. But also make sure you're going to see us on Familia FFB on YouTube or Apple, Google, Spotify. Thank you to Spotify for podcasters to getting our independent podcast out there. Again, we're a proud member of the Fantasy Points Media Group, and this is the great season, familia. This is the learning season. So enjoy it, and remember, todos somos familia. Salud.